On March 20th, Air India's Delhi-Newark flight had 89 passengers requiring wheelchair assistance. Just weeks earlier, on February 4th, a flight from Delhi to Chicago recorded 97 wheelchair requests. Then on February 19th, Delhi-Chicago flight had 99 wheelchair bookings. That's almost 30% of passengers in the plane requiring wheelchairs.
Every few months, a video pops up online showing a crowd of passengers at an airport, all seemingly disabled. But then, like a miracle, as soon as the plane lands, they rise up from their wheelchairs and sprint toward the exit. Congratulations, everyone. We just witnessed the world's biggest mass healing, sponsored by an Indian flight. Sounds harsh? Maybe. But that's exactly what's been happening. And it's become one of the strangest, most embarrassing travel trends linked to Indian passengers around the world. People pretending to need wheelchairs just to board first, skip lines, or get special treatment, and then walking away perfectly fine the moment the plane stops moving. Airlines have been complaining about it for years, and staff say it's getting worse. Now, before the usual "not all Indians" comments start flooding in, of course, not everyone does this. But enough people are doing it that it's making headlines globally, and worse, it's fueling a growing frustration against Indian travelers as a group. We see growing anti-Indian sentiments across the world, especially in the West, because of things like this. So let's break down what's actually going on here. At most airports, passengers who genuinely need wheelchairs, elderly people, those with medical conditions, people with disabilities, can request free assistance. It's a basic, decent service meant to help those who can't walk long distances, not those who won't. But many passengers, especially from India, according to airline staff, have learned to exploit this system. Why? Because if you request wheelchair assistance, you get to skip queues, board first, and get personal help from ground staff. In other words, you get treated like a VIP. And apparently, that little bit of special treatment is just too tempting to resist for some people. Air India's ground staff have complained that they're swamped with fake wheelchair requests, especially on long-haul flights. At one point, reports claimed that on certain flights from India to the US or UK, over 30% of passengers requested wheelchairs at departure. But mysteriously, almost none needed them upon landing. When asked why, some just said they were tired. Others straight up laughed and walked away. It's not just rude, it's cruel. Because while these people are faking it for convenience, someone who genuinely needs help might have to wait longer or get left behind. Elderly and disabled travelers have reported being delayed or even missing connections because wheelchairs were all being used by perfectly healthy passengers. Think about that. You're a 75-year-old woman with arthritis trying to reach your gate, and you're stuck waiting because a 30-year-old Indian man with a big belly who just doesn't feel like walking decided his comfort matters more than your mobility. It's selfishness dressed up as smugness. And this isn't an isolated thing. There's a pattern, a wider culture of bending rules, cutting corners, and thinking that if you can get away with it, then it's smart, not wrong. That mindset shows up in so many other ways, from fake degrees and visa fraud to exam cheating and call center scams. Let's start with immigration fraud, a global headache that's often linked back to the same idea. Just find a shortcut. Every year, thousands of Indian nationals are caught using fake documents to apply for visas in countries like Canada, the UK, and Australia. Some forge bank statements or work certificates. Others pretend to be students when they're really planning to work illegally. It's become such a big issue that immigration departments in Western countries have special teams that focus specifically on fraudulent Indian applications. There have even been cases where entire consultancy agencies in India exist solely to help people fake their way through visa interviews, teaching them what to say, fabricating documents, even photoshopping family pictures to make their story look believable. Imagine how much effort that takes, and then think how much progress that same energy could make if it was used legitimately. Then there's the infamous call center scams, where people, often pretending to be from Apple tech support or IRS services, call up foreigners and trick them into giving away thousands of dollars. And while it's easy to think these are just small-time crooks, some of these operations are massive, multi-million-dollar rackets. In 2023, Indian police raided one such center in Gurgaon and found hundreds of employees cold-calling Americans and Europeans using scripts to scare them into paying fake tax debts. Again, not everyone does this, but it's enough to stain the reputation of millions who work hard and play by the rules. Ask any Indian living abroad, and they'll tell you how often they face suspicion just because of the actions of a few. It's exhausting and unfair, and the problem goes deeper than just the actions themselves. It's the attitude, this unspoken belief that cheating a little bit isn't really wrong if it helps you get ahead. You see it in schools, where cheating in exams is normalized. You see it in businesses, where bribery is considered just how things work. You see it in politics, where people vote for leaders not because they're honest, but because they're smart enough to game the system. It's like corruption has become a skill, something to admire, not condemn. And that's where the real tragedy lies. Because that attitude doesn't just ruin a country's reputation abroad, it poisons its progress at home. And when that culture travels, when it's carried abroad by citizens who think the same way, it creates backlash. Look at what's happening now in countries like Canada, Australia, and the UK. Anti-Indian sentiment is quietly rising. People are getting tired of stories about visa frauds, housing scams, and airport chaos. On social media, you'll find threads full of people sharing their bad experiences with Indian travelers or tenants, some exaggerated, some true. And while we can argue that this is racism or bias, it's also partly the consequence of too many bad apples spoiling the bunch. The wheelchair issue is the perfect symbol of this bigger problem. It's small, selfish, and seemingly harmless, but it says so much about the mindset behind it. It's not about being poor or desperate. Most of the people doing this are middle class, even wealthy. It's about entitlement, the feeling that rules are optional, and empathy is someone else's problem. And the worst part? Airlines are now so used to it that they've started factoring it into their operations. Some staff even jokingly call it the Indian miracle when dozens of passengers suddenly walk off unaided after a flight. That's not funny. It's humiliating. It's a national embarrassment. And yes, this isn't just an Indian problem. People everywhere try to cheat systems. Americans fake disabilities for parking spots. Europeans dodge taxes. But the difference is scale and perception. When the same behavior keeps showing up in the same community again and again, it becomes a stereotype. And once that happens, it's nearly impossible to shake off. And worst of all, Indians usually do it while abroad, painting themselves in a bad light all across the globe. The real solution starts with shame, not the destructive kind, but the productive kind, the kind that makes people say, this is not who we want to be. India is a country of 1.4 billion people, full of smart, hardworking, honest individuals. But when the world keeps seeing viral clips of people faking wheelchairs, scamming foreigners, or cheating their way through borders, that good image gets buried under the noise. There has to be accountability, both social and cultural. Airlines should start charging for wheelchair requests, unless medically certified. Governments should crack down harder on fraudulent agencies, and ordinary people should start calling this behavior out, instead of laughing it off or defending it out of misplaced nationalism. Because let's face it, you can't demand global respect while acting without it. You can't ask to be treated fairly while proudly bending the rules. And you definitely can't build a positive image while dragging down those who actually deserve help. At the end of the day, pretending to need a wheelchair isn't just a travel hack, it's a moral failure. It shows how empathy can die in the face of convenience. It shows how a few can ruin the dignity of many. And it shows why, sometimes, the world's frustration isn't always racism. Sometimes it's just disappointment.